Welcome back, this is Nick, and today I'm talking to you about a theory I've had for Tangled the series. Among the many magical affairs of Tangled's series is the existence of various ghosts. Our first is known as Ruthless Ruth, and she used to run at the Snuggly Duckling. While she stuck to having a clear ghostly appearance and being within the pub, ghosts and spirits of other kinds are shown later, including those that can change to a human appearance, and those who are bound to certain rules. We see these green ghosts who are servants of an evil demon, and blue ghosts of the Dark Kingdom's past rulers. It seems, based on all these examples, that ghosts' abilities depend on the way they died and the kinds of promises they left behind. Now, why am I talking about all this? Well, partly because it's interesting, and partly because I need to give you guys some of the context behind my theory today, or you would never really hear it out. So after all that, and the fact that you must have read the title of the video, I think that Varian, at least for most of the show, is dead. Was that shocking, or does that make a lot of sense? Let me know in the comments while I describe my point. Here is a reminder that this video will contain a lot of spoilers for the entire series. Also, apologies for the fact that my voice may not be up to code today. I have had a cold. So we all know that Varian ran towards the castle after his father began to be encased in the amber, and that it took a long time for him to get there. However, despite the fact that so many people managed to get rescued from the blizzard, it was described multiple times to be deadly and very serious, with Nigel worrying that Rapunzel's parents wouldn't make it back, and Rapunzel worrying that Eugene and friends wouldn't make it back. This all opens up the possibility that Varian, who was out there on his own the entire time, didn't survive after all. Of course, when we next see Varian, he does seem to be alive, and he reaches his home. The next scene afterwards was him breaking down at the sight of his father, which has a split, and the rest of the scene occurs much later in the episode, being 10 minutes later in our time, and the next day in universe. Personally, I think it's possible that the effects of the snowstorm could very likely cause death from exposure and hypothermia, which could either have happened while Varian was travelling or after he arrived home. This second possibility would make more sense in my understanding of how ghostly presences work in the show, as Varian would have already made his promise to save his father, which would drive his spirit afterwards. This would mean that Varian dies of resulting hypothermia or other illnesses due to exposure of the blizzard, shortly after we witness his song reprisal. Now this theory would explain a few things. For example, the show establishes both that Varian spent a long time on his own after the blizzard, and that Old Corona was destroyed by black rocks and the blizzard itself. Considering that, Varian wouldn't have had any access to food or appropriate housing for months on end. If he was alive at the start of this time, there is no way he would be after all of that. If he was a ghost, of course, he wouldn't need to worry. Later on, we see Varian has terrible survival instincts, not reacting strongly to life-threatening situations in the tunnels under Corona, not hesitating when Rapunzel directs black rocks at him during their fight. Even later in the series, Varian seems not to value his safety, as shown in the intro episodes to Season 3, where he was willing to sacrifice himself, and in Cassandra's Revenge, where he barely flinches during the entire sequence. Also, one moment I remember clearly, in the episode Flimposter, where Varian jumps off a large box with no challenge, and is later directly blown up by an experiment and has no trouble, while Lance a few metres back suffers temporary deafness. Emotionally, this theory would have a large effect on the characters. First of all, it would provide a lot of guilt and responsibility for Rapunzel. If she found out that her actions led to Varian's death in the blizzard, she would be absolutely wrecked. This is probably the in-universe reason why Varian wouldn't let anyone know about it. Considering the world as its own entity rather than a TV show for children, Varian likely didn't care originally about calling Rapunzel out for his own death, as he was so focused on his father and felt a deep rage towards Rapunzel for her actions. After the reconciliation, though, Varian wouldn't want to harm Rapunzel by letting anyone know just how bad the consequences of her actions are, which would explain why he still hasn't said anything. How would the other characters react, though? Well, largely with horror at the fact that one of their friends is actually dead, but I also feel Varian would most likely tell someone he knows well that wouldn't immediately tell everyone else, and his safest bet for that by the end of the show is Eugene. The man has grown since the time he couldn't keep secrets, and the two have a strong relationship in the show. Varian would probably approach him, if anyone, to finally tell the secret, if he needed advice about it. Of course, Eugene, after being terrified and then supportive, wouldn't know much about ghosts anyway, but it's the thought that counts. If Varian wanted to know anything, he could probably find it, so really this would be through his own emotional support. The only evidence I can think of against this theory is the fact that Varian can apparently be hurt, both off-screen in Cassandra's Revenge and during the decay incantation in the final episode, and that he never demonstrates overt ghost abilities. I'm sure the show writers wouldn't be allowed to suggest a main character was killed for good, but in terms of him getting hurt, I honestly have no idea. Maybe he was pretending in some way, like he's so used to pretending to be alive that he has involuntary-ish reactions, such as responding when something punches you, and then he has to keep up the act so he doesn't reveal the terrifying truth to everyone else. All this in consideration, how much does this theory fit to the canon of the show? I would personally give it an 8 out of 10, but obviously that's my own opinion. It's exciting to imagine more emotionally driven plot points than the ones that the show gets to explore, especially when I was slightly disappointed by most of the show's post-season 1. Please let me know what you think of this theory in the comments below, about whether it makes sense, whether it would work for any good stories after the show ends, anything else that could support this theory. I'm rambling on, so I'll just leave it with this. Until next time, this has been Nick, and I'll hopefully talk to you guys again soon.